The stranger in the snow. The wind howled across the plains like a wounded beast. Snow swept through the Wyoming night, turning the open land into a ghostly blur of white. The storm had rolled in fast, the kind that swallowed men whole and left only silence behind. Elias Ward had seen enough winters to know when to ride home early, but he hadn't. Not tonight. He had stayed out late mending the fence near the river bend, trying to outrun memories that clung to him like shadows, memories of a war that had taken his brother and a wife buried 2 winters past. Now, as he guided his horse through the whiteout, the world seemed to vanish in every direction. Only the low hum of his lantern and the rhythmic crunch of hooves broke the silence. He was a man who rarely spoke, not because he couldn't, but because life had taught him that words did little to change pain. Half a mile from his ranch, through the storm's roar, Elias saw something, a shape crumpled near the fence line. At first, he thought it was a stray calf, maybe lost from a neighboring herd. But as he drew closer, his heart kicked hard in his chest. It wasn't an animal. It was a girl. She was huddled against the fence post, wrapped in a thin shawl that had long since surrendered to the wind. Snow clung to her lashes and hair, turning her face ghost pale. Her hands were bare, trembling. Elias dismounted fast, Snow up to his knees, and crouched beside her. "Miss!" His voice came rough, barely more than a rasp from years of silence. "You hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, wide, frightened, and strangely soft. They were the color of river water at dawn. She tried to speak, but her lips were blue. "Please," she whispered weakly, "don't leave me here." He didn't ask questions. He lifted her. She was light as a child, and carried her to his horse. The storm bit through his coat, but he barely felt it. He wrapped his duster around her small frame, swung up into the saddle, and spurred the horse toward the ranch. The cabin lights flickered like faint stars in the distance. When Elias pushed through the door, the heat from the fire hit his face, and the scent of pine and smoke filled the air. He laid her gently near the hearth, stripping the wet shawl from her shoulders. Her dress was torn and soaked through. He grabbed a blanket from the chair, draped it around her, and tossed more wood into the fire. She stirred, trying to sit up, her teeth chattering. "You're safe," Elias said quietly. "Don't move." The girl looked at him then, really looked. A tall man with a hard, scar-lined face, eyes as gray as the storm outside, and a silence that felt heavier than the wind itself. I didn't mean to trouble you," she said faintly. "I was trying to reach the town, but my horse, he ran off." Elias nodded. "You'd half frozen before sunrise." She blinked at the fire, holding her trembling hands out toward it. "I thought I'd die out there." "You almost did," he said. Then softer, "What's your name?" "Clara," she whispered. "Clara Finch." Her voice trembled not from cold now, but from something deeper, fear, or maybe memory. Elias poured hot water into a tin cup, stirred in a bit of coffee and sugar, and handed it to her. "Drink." She sipped it, eyes never leaving his face. He wasn't used to being looked at that way, with both gratitude and uncertainty. Most folks in these parts called him the silent rancher. They said he'd lost his words with his wife. Maybe they weren't wrong. After a long pause, Clara spoke again. "You live alone?" He nodded once. "Since my wife passed." She looked down at the cup. "I'm sorry." Elias said nothing. He just stoked the fire and listened to the storm batter the windows. The coat. Hours passed. The fire crackled steady now, filling the room with orange light. Clara's face regained color, though her dress still clung damply to her skin. She sat curled up near the flames, watching the snow swirl outside. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "Sir, may I?" She hesitated, fingers tightening around the blanket. "May I slip under your coat?" Elias froze. He turned slowly. She wasn't looking at him. Her gaze was on the fire, her shoulders trembling. "It's just the cold," she murmured quickly. I can't seem to get warm." For a moment, the only sound was the wind moaning through the chimney. Then Elias rose silently, crossed the room, and took his long brown duster from the chair. Without a word, he draped it around her shoulders. The fabric was heavy, smelling faintly of leather, rain, and wood smoke, the scent of a man who had spent a lifetime fighting the wilderness. Clara pulled it tight around her small frame, her eyes closing in relief. "Thank you," she whispered. Elias stood there a moment longer, unsure what to do with the sudden tightness in his chest. Then he turned away, poured himself a drink of whiskey, and sat by the window, staring into the storm. But he couldn't stop thinking about that voice. "Sir, can I slip under your coat?" Soft, desperate, innocent, a past unspoken. By morning, the snow had stopped. The world outside gleamed white and still, a silent graveyard of fences and frozen tracks. Elias stepped outside to fetch water from the well, the cold biting his face. When he came back, Clara was standing by the window, wrapped in his coat. Her hair, long, honey brown, caught the morning light. She turned when he entered, startled. "I didn't mean to pry," she said, gesturing toward a photograph on the mantel. A woman with kind eyes, holding a baby. "My wife," Elias said quietly. "And my boy. Both gone. Fever." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. He nodded once. "You said you were heading to town. You got kin there?" She hesitated. "No, I was running." Elias's eyes lifted. "From what?" "From a man," she said softly. "One who thinks he owns me." She looked down at her hands. "I worked at the saloon in Pine Ridge. Just cleaning tables, nothing more. But the owner, Mr. Thorne, he tried to force me to stay. Said I owed him for the roof over my head. When I refused, he sent men after me." Elias's jaw clenched. The West was full of men like Thorne, snakes in fine coats who preyed on the desperate. "You think he'll come for you?" Elias asked. "I know he will," Claire said. "He never lets go of what he thinks is his." Elias looked into the fire, silent. Something old and raw stirred inside him. That same need to protect that had once driven him to fight for strangers in the war. But this time, it wasn't a battle of nations. It was one frightened girl and a man who had already lost too much. "You can stay here until the storm clears," he said finally. Her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "Thank you, sir." Evening quiet. That night, the ranch felt alive again. Clara helped cook supper, cornbread, beans, and coffee, humming softly as she moved about the kitchen. The sound was strange but soothing, like sunlight in a house that had forgotten it. Elias sat by the fire, mending his gloves, pretending not to notice how her laughter lightened the room. When she caught him looking, she smiled, shy, gentle. "You're not as silent as they say, are you?" she teased. He gave a rare half-smile. "Who says that?" "The folks in town. They say Elias Ward don't talk, don't drink with anyone, and don't let anyone close." He met her gaze. "They're right about most of it, but not all," she said softly. Something passed between them then. A flicker of warmth that neither spoke of. The kind that grows not from words, but from the quiet between them. The warning. It was near midnight when the first knock came, 3 hard raps against the door. Elias rose instantly, hand on the revolver by his belt. Clara's eyes widened. He motioned her to stay quiet and stepped to the door. "Who's there?" A rough voice answered, muffled by the cold. "Looking for a runaway girl. Heard she might have passed this way." Elias's jaw tightened. He opened the door, just enough to see 2 men on horseback, lanterns swinging in the wind. "Don't know what you're talking about," Elias said flatly. The taller of the 2 smirked. "Pretty little thing, name of Clara Finch. Works for Mr. Thorne. You'd remember her if you'd seen her." Elias's eyes were cold as steel. "Ain't seen her. Storm's too thick for travel. You should ride on before it gets worse." The men glanced at each other. "If you do see her," one said, "tell her Mr. Thorne don't like debts left unpaid." Elias shut the door in their faces. When he turned, Clara was standing by the fire, pale and trembling. "They'll come back," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but they won't find you." A silent promise. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat near the hearth, wrapped in Elias's coat, watching him as he kept watch by the window, rifle across his lap. The firelight flickered over his face, a man carved from storms and silence. She wanted to thank him again, to say something that would break the heavy quiet. But when she opened her mouth, no words came. Instead, she just whispered softly, almost to herself, "Sir, can I slip under your coat?" Elias looked at her, startled, then saw the tears glinting in her eyes. Not from cold this time, but from fear and exhaustion. Without a word, he crossed the room, sat beside her, and draped his coat around them both. The storm outside howled, but inside the cabin, the silence was warm, the kind that holds 2 broken souls together, if only for the night. The storm had dawned. The fire had burned low by morning. Gray light seeped through the frost-laced window, touching everything in pale silver. The storm outside had broken, but a deeper one was coming. Elias felt it in his bones. He rose quietly, slipped on his coat, and checked the rifle. Clara stirred from where she slept near the hearth, his coat still draped around her like armor. "Morning," she said softly, voice husky from sleep. "Morning," Elias replied, eyes on the window. "You should eat something. I'm going to check the horses." When he opened the door, the air hit like glass. The world was a sheet of white, but it wasn't the snow that made him pause. Tracks fresh ones. He followed them to the edge of the barn. There, the prints of 2 men on horseback, circling the property before dawn. Watching, he tightened his jaw. Thorne's dogs. They hadn't given up. The decision. Inside, Clara waited by the fire, clutching a tin cup of coffee that trembled in her hands. When Elias told her what he'd seen, her eyes filled with fear. "I told you they'd come," she whispered. "Thorne doesn't stop. He'll burn this place to the ground to get me back." Elias set the rifle on the table, his voice low but steady. "Then we don't let him." She looked up, startled. You can't fight them all. I don't plan to, he said. But I won't hand you over either. Something in his tone, calm, solid, unshakable, steadied her trembling heart. Why are you helping me? She asked after a moment. You don't even know me. Elias stared into the flames. Because I once promised someone I'd never turn away a soul in need. My wife used to say that mercy's the only thing that keeps a man human. Clara's throat tightened. She sounded like she was kind. She was, he said quietly, and I failed her once. I won't fail again. He rose, adjusting his hat. We'll leave before they return. There's a trail through the canyon. Narrow, but hidden. We'll ride to river. Sheriff, there's a good man. He'll see to it Thorn doesn't touch you again. Clara hesitated, fear flickering behind her eyes. What if they find us before then? Elias met her gaze, eyes like iron. Then they'll wish they hadn't. The ride. They packed fast, food, blankets, a rifle, and a revolver. Elias saddled the horses, his movements precise, silent. Clara clung to his coat as the wind bit through the morning air. The world outside was white and empty, but in that emptiness lay danger. Every hill, every tree could hide eyes watching. As they rode, the snow crunched beneath hooves, breaking the eerie stillness. Clara glanced at Elias again and again. The way he rode straight-backed, scanning the horizon, one hand never far from his gun. You fought before, she said quietly. He nodded once. Civil War, then a few years chasing outlaws. You learn quick what men are capable of when they've got darkness in their hearts. Clara swallowed hard. Mr. Thorne has plenty of that. Then he's already lost, Elias said simply. The canyon. By mid-afternoon, clouds gathered again, heavy and gray. They reached the narrow canyon, a long cut of stone winding through frozen brush. Elias dismounted, studying the tracks in the snow. No one's been through here recently, he murmured. Clara looked around nervously. The cliffs towered high above, jagged and cold. It feels quiet. Too quiet, he said. They rode on, the path twisting between walls of stone. Snow fell light now, drifting like ash. For a while all was still. Then, a gunshot cracked the silence. Clara screamed as the bullet tore into the rock beside her. The horses reared. Down! Elias barked, pulling her from the saddle. They dove behind a boulder, just as another shot rang out. Echoes rolled through the canyon like thunder. Voices followed, rough, mocking. There she is. Thorne wants her alive, boys. Elias peered around the rock. 3 riders, rifles raised, closing in fast. He took a breath, steady and cold. 3 men. 1 rifle. 1 chance. Stay here, he whispered. Clara clutched his arm. Please don't. But he was already moving. The fight. Elias stepped out into the open, rifle leveled. The first shot cracked, dropping the lead rider before the others even saw him. The second man wheeled his horse and fired wildly. Elias ducked behind a rock, returned fire, and the man tumbled from his saddle, rifle clattering against the stone. The last one turned tail, spurring his horse hard. Elias aimed, then stopped. Let him go. The man would run back to Thorne, and Thorne would come himself. When he returned to Clara, her face was pale but steady. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head. You saved me again. He said nothing, just checked the rifle and reloaded. We move. Now. Nightfall. They reached the edge of the canyon by dusk. The storm clouds had broken into streaks of crimson, painting the snow in blood-red light. Elias set up camp near a frozen stream. Clara helped gather wood, though her hands trembled. When the fire burned steady, she sat beside him, silent for a long time. Do you ever miss her? She asked softly. Every day, he said. But I learned something since she's been gone. What's that? That the world don't stop for grief. You either ride on, or it rides over you. She nodded slowly, eyes shining with the firelight. You talk like a man who's done both. Elias gave a faint, tired smile. Maybe I have. The silence that followed was gentle. Outside, the wind had died, and the stars had come out, cold, endless, watching. The return of Thorne. They didn't make it to Riverton by morning. At first light, the sound of horses echoed again through the trees. More this time. Elias counted 6, maybe 7. Thorne had come. He was a thick man in a fine coat, face red from whiskey and arrogance. He dismounted, boots crunching in the frost, and sneered at the sight of Clara standing by the fire. Well, look at that, he drawled. Little bird thought she could fly away. But I always get what's mine. Elias stepped between them, rifle in hand. She's not yours. Thorne laughed. And who the hell are you? Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence said enough. Thorne smirked. You got 1 chance, cowboy. Step aside, and I'll let you live. Elias's eyes hardened. You had your chance when you sent those men to freeze in the snow. Thorne's face twisted. Then you die with her. The gunfire. The first shot ripped through the air. Elias rolled behind a fallen log, returning fire with calm precision. Clara crouched low, hands over her ears as bullets tore through branches and snow. Thorne's men spread out, circling. Elias dropped one, then another. His movements were measured. No waste, no panic. But there were too many. A bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him back. He gritted his teeth, firing again, and one more man went down. Elias! Clara screamed. He turned, saw Thorne aiming right at her. Elias didn't think. He lunged forward, taking a shot meant for her. The force knocked him to his knees, pain bursting white in his side. Clara's cry echoed through the clearing. She grabbed his revolver, hands shaking, and fired once, twice. The bullet struck Thorne square in the chest. He staggered, eyes wide with shock, then fell backward into the snow. Silence. Only the crackle of the fire and Clara's sobs filled the air. The aftermath. Clara knelt beside Elias, pressing her hands to the wound. No, no, please. He caught her wrist gently. It's all right. It's not, she cried. You can't leave me now. He smiled faintly. I'm not leaving. Not yet. He looked up at the sky. Cold, bright blue after the storm. You're free now, Clara. Don't waste it. Tears streaked her cheeks. You saved me. Twice. He shook his head weakly. You saved me too. You made this place feel alive again. She leaned closer, her forehead against his. Don't talk like that. You're gonna make it. You have to. Elias managed a soft chuckle. Maybe, but if I don't promise me something. What? Keep writing. Find a life worth living. Somewhere the snow don't reach. She nodded through tears. I promise. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again, faint warmth in his gaze. You know you still got my coat. She gave a broken laugh. Then I'll never take it off. He smiled, the first true smile in years. And then, for the first time since his wife's death, Elias Ward spoke her name aloud, a whisper lost in the wind. Spring comes. Weeks later, when the thaw came, travelers spoke of a girl who rode into Riverton wearing a long brown duster too big for her small frame. She carried a rifle across her back and a look in her eyes that made men lower their hats. Some said she'd buried a rancher out by the canyon. Others said he'd survived, living quiet on the plains. But those who rode past his cabin swore they sometimes saw smoke rising from the chimney, faint, steady, as if someone still kept the fire burning. And every time the wind whispered through the valley, it carried a sound almost like a girl's voice, soft, trembling, grateful. Sir, can I slip under your coat? Epilogue, the coat and the silence. The coat hung by the door, weathered and worn. The storm had ended long ago, but the scent of smoke and pine still lingered in the fabric. Clara sometimes sat by the fire, tracing the stitching, remembering the man who had given her warmth when the world had none. She had found work in town, teaching children their letters, smiling again. Not because she'd forgotten, but because she carried him with her. And on nights when the snow fell thick and silent, she would pull that coat around her shoulders and whisper into the dark. Thank you, Elias. The end.